you can't achieve peace, and you can't achieve much if you're working with only half of the population. Your Excellencies, Generals, colleagues, I feel very privileged to be here with you today and to speak about such an important subject. I'm going to use an analogy that is perhaps more appropriate for a Canadian or a multinational environment than that of Korea. It has to do with lotteries. And I understand that in Korea, gambling is illegal. So if you will permit me, I'm not trying to encourage gambling or illegal activity of any other kind, but I'm going to use an analogy that relates to lottery tickets. Gambling is not necessarily a very popular thing in Canada either. I'm not a poker player. I don't have a very good poker face, so I try and avoid it. But lottery tickets, every now and then, I will go out and buy. My husband, probably more often than myself. In 1990, I won the lottery. It was a huge win. It was the career lottery. I was attending university in New Brunswick, a small province in Canada, and I was partying very hard, not studying very much. And a friend of mine who had gone away to military college came home over a break, a long weekend in October. And she relayed to me how frustrated she was at this military college that she was attending, and she hated it. She said, I can't quit until December, but in December I'm coming home and I'm never going back. I'm done. And so I asked her, I said, what don't you like about it? What is so horrible that you can't wait to leave? And she explained to me that they had mandatory study times in the evening. They had mandatory physical training in the morning. They had to go to classes in uniform, they had inspections, they had all sorts of activities that gave her a structured and disciplined life that she was very keen to get away from. And as I was reflecting on my own experience at university, studying not very much, but partying probably too hard, I reflected that that was probably something that would be good for me. And it was exactly what I needed. So I joined the military and I went to military college. And it's very similar to the story you heard earlier from General Gerde. I wasn't necessarily planning to make a career of it. But it grows on you, as I'm sure many of you can relate to. So I proceeded to military college and I decided that I was going to join the infantry. Canada opened the infantry to women in 1989, and I started military college in 1990. So there were very, very few women that were working in that area. I was very often the only woman. There were perhaps more colleagues at military college, but in my infantry training, certainly I was alone. So there were some challenges to this, as you can well imagine. In my mind, nothing that is really rewarding comes easily. So I didn't mind the challenge. In fact, I kind of sought after them. Not only did I decide to go and join the infantry, but I also decided to do my training in my second language, which was French. And I ended up joining the French-speaking regiment within our country, and so worked in my second language for most of my career. There were other challenges as well that I didn't necessarily choose, but that came with the package. They came with the lottery, if you will. And a lot of those challenges had to do with misogyny, with a resistance, mostly among my peers, and a little bit my superiors, who didn't see that women had a place in the infantry. The activities that I saw, or the attitudes that I saw, were across a broad spectrum of different attitudes and behaviors. When I first arrived in my infantry battalion, my company commander told me that I had hair about to here, which was, it was okay according to our rules, as long as it was above the collar in the back, but to his liking it was too long, it made me look like a girl. So he said, you either cut your hair or you attach it. And I'm like, my hair's not long enough to put up in a bun. So I had to cut my hair. They made sure that I did everything I could to be the same as the men. And similar to what we heard earlier, at the beginning that was okay with me. I was happy to fit in, striving to fit in, actually. And so I would conform to all of these. And it wasn't until later in my career where I was determined that I wouldn't adopt the persona of someone else, but I would be true to myself and represent women in that space. I failed my first, what we call phase 3 training. It's the most difficult, everybody probably says that, but everybody used to say it was the most difficult course that you could do in the Canadian Armed Forces. It was phase 3 infantry training. And I did it the first time, and my peers made my life so difficult that I considered quitting, but I didn't. Instead, my instructors decided that they wouldn't have a woman pass their course, and so they failed me. And they told me this years after, said, you know, we really weren't very nice with you. I'm like, I remember. So I failed the course, but I came back and I did it again, because I was committed to not letting them win. And by them, I mean, you know, not just the individuals, but the system itself. We had a lot of changes to make within the Canadian Armed Forces with respect to integration of women at that time. And we've come a long way since. I'm really proud of where we are right now in the Canadian Armed Forces and the integration of women and the inclusion of all sorts of different minorities within the Canadian Armed Forces. So 30 years later, after having gone through these challenges and overcome them, I got the opportunity to go on my first UN deployment. And I was really encouraged. I had, at that time, 32 years serving in the military as an infantry officer. And I thought that, you know, things were good. So I deployed to MONUSCO as the Deputy Chief of Staff, Operations and Plans, a senior position within the force headquarters, one of a certain prestige, I would say, generally. But when I got there, I found that not only did I have the usual challenges of working in a multinational organization, which I'm sure many of you can relate to, but I also found that it felt like I was going 30 years backwards with respect to integration of women. And certainly not all cultures are the same, and we don't all integrate minorities to the same degree. But this was one of the most challenging parts of my career. It was this feeling of having surpassed all these obstacles only to go back and have to do them again. It wasn't always things that were directed to me. Sometimes it was me observing how people reacted with other women. The SRSG of MONUSCO, while I was deployed, was Bintu Keita from Kenya, I believe. She was an amazing woman. But even she had challenges with respect to misogyny and men believing that they could tell her what to do, even though she was the head of mission of MONUSCO. Her being referred to as a little old woman, a little old lady. She was the chief, the head of mission. And this is how she was treated because she was a woman. There were women of my colleagues who weren't able to get promotions because their countries didn't allow them to do a staff course that would permit them to be promoted. So it didn't matter how good they were, how devoted, how determined, how loyal. They would never be able to gain this promotion because their country didn't allow them the same opportunities as men. There were multiple examples of how the status of women and the gender equality was lacking across many nations and across the mission. So there were multiple challenges. It sounds weird. I'm telling you I won the lottery and I'm telling you all of these problems and challenges, but that was not all. There were so many opportunities that I got from being in the military and from my deployment, both. there is an opportunity to travel, for sure. Anybody who's joining the military probably recognizes that there's an opportunity to travel. I've been to Bosnia, to Afghanistan, to the Congo on deployments. I've been to numerous other countries on shorter visits. It's a wonderful opportunity. I've been to multiple places also throughout Canada. I love traveling. It's marvelous. That's not even the best part, in my mind, of what my military career gave me as opportunities. I think some of the best things that I gained were the opportunity to help other people. And I saw that in every deployment I did. And even, I would say, working at home in garrison with the people who were part of my team. The opportunities and the moments that I remember with the most fondness are the moments where I was able to help someone else achieve their goal, whether it be a woman in Bosnia who had burned herself on the stove, and we were able to provide medical support to her to make sure that she healed properly, whether it be within Afghanistan, providing security to women who were transiting through difficult areas, or in the Congo when we were providing patrols and security to make sure that the local women were not being accosted and assaulted while they were transiting to their fields. And of course, it wasn't all about women, but every time there was an opportunity to help women, I felt that a little bit stronger, and it resonated a little bit more with me. I've also seen other people's contributions, and which is in so many ways transcend and go way beyond what I have myself contributed. But this feeling of being a part of a team, as I'm sure many of you in the military can relate to, this is something that you can't get in just any job. I've been inspired by so many different people. I had the opportunity to listen to different leaders, to see them at work, and to gain faith in the human race, much more than I have lost faith. I gained a sense of belonging and inclusion despite the initial and sporadic messages of exclusion. The inclusion that I felt from being in the military is something that I don't think I could have got out of another career. My work in the military has led me to want very strongly to represent Canada across the world and to strive to achieve peace. And I ask myself regularly, how is that possible? How can we achieve peace? And I strongly believe that we can't achieve peace if we're working alone. You can't achieve peace, and you can't achieve much if you're working with only half of the population, or if you're working with only a certain sector of a population. So in the world that we're seeing today, where there's so much change and so many different challenges, we're seeing renewed territorial aggression. We're seeing challenges with respect to international law. We're seeing climate change and natural disasters on the rise. We're seeing instances of human insecurity that are unimaginable and unfathomable for people who, like myself, live in a country that seems so isolated and privileged to be away from those things. But they're there. And as I look to how we manage that, I think my response is inclusion and collaboration. And so when I hear the resistance and I reflect back on my own experience of resistance to gender equality and inclusion, I have to stop and think that there's no way to gain sustained peace, to innovate and pull the maximum potential out of who we are as humans, not only as Canadians, not only as the UN, not only as any nation or group, but as people. How are we to pull the potential out of all of us if we are not looking for gender equity or gender equality? It's not a net zero game. there's not, if you include someone else, you're not excluding another group. There's a way to, in Canada, we have a saying, you can grow the pie. If you're cutting the pie into different pieces to share, it's not because you give a piece to one person that another person can't have any. There are ways you can find ways to make the pie bigger so that everybody can get a piece and everybody can gain from the situation at hand. So how do we do that? How do we get to gender equality, which is essential in my mind to peace? I think that we have to bring it down to tangible things that we can see within our own organizations, within our own countries, within our militaries or our workplace. The first thing I think that is necessary is to have a safe, inclusive, and respectful environment. And so, for me, this includes accessibility. And accessibility is one thing. I mentioned earlier the example of women that I know that were not able to go on courses, but it's also having access to positions, having access to deployments, and some of the barriers to deployments have been mentioned earlier. But it's not just about numbers, neither, of how many women are deployed. It's about giving them the opportunity to have a meaningful contribution. And that doesn't just mean putting them in a position and having it be something that is kind of a token. It means actually giving them the authorities, the responsibilities that go with that position. And that shouldn't be based on gender, that should be based on the qualifications and the competency of the different individuals. And women are competent, are qualified, and have a right to be in any of those positions. So, I think the last part that I would add, besides the environment and the accessibility, is accountability. And holding people accountable for how they are striving, how they are or impeding gender equality, I think is important. And while there's value in not shaming specific people or specific nations, we need to acknowledge that we have to work together, and we have to hold those who are not contributing accountable when they're not doing so. So, my husband continues to buy lottery tickets. And he's asked me recently, he said, so if I really bought a lottery ticket like 2 weeks ago, it was worth $52 million. And he said to me, so if we win the $52 million, are you gonna quit? He's retired, he's been retired for about 6 years, and he's anxious to start traveling. I said, well, yes, but. I said, before I quit, I have a few things that I want to finish. So when I reflect on this, I said, if I was ready to quit in a minute, if I won the lottery, or even if I didn't, then that would be indicative to me that perhaps this job is not all that I believe it is. But the fact that, and I truly, truly believe that, even if I won $52 million tomorrow, I wouldn't be running out the door, because I think that the things that we're doing within the military, within the UN, I think they're all valuable things that need to be done. And as challenging as they might be sometimes, they're equally or more rewarding, and they're also necessary. They're necessary for the person who I want to be in the next few years, but they're also necessary for the people who are following us and who are coming into this domain after we leave. So, lottery or not, it's already won, and I'll be sticking around to continue on with it. Kamsahamnida.